There's a moment when you realize your own family has written a version of you in their heads, and nothing you do will ever make them rewrite it. I know that moment. I lived it. And I'm telling you this because I think you might know it too. My grandmother's 80th birthday was supposed to be a celebration. That's what my uncle kept calling it when he texted me 3 days before. A celebration. Like the word alone would make me feel included in something I'd been quietly removed from for years. I almost didn't go. I want to be honest about that. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my dashboard, telling myself I could still leave. I could text my uncle and say something came up. I was good at that. I'd been making myself small and convenient for this family my whole life. But I thought about my grandmother, not the family, her. The way she used to keep a photograph of me on her nightstand, even when no one else was talking about me. The way she'd call me on random Tuesdays just to ask if I was eating enough. She was 80 years old. I wasn't going to miss her birthday because her son and his wife made me feel like an inconvenience. So I got out of the car. The restaurant was one my brother-in-law had chosen. Of course it was. He had opinions about everything. Wine lists, seating arrangements, which fork was appropriate for which course. He'd married my sister 6 years ago, and somewhere in that time, he'd become the person who organized family events, which really meant he became the person who decided who mattered at them. I found out about the dinner the way I found out about most things involving my family, late and indirectly. My cousin mentioned it in a group chat, not the family group chat I was in, a different one, apparently, the one where the actual planning happened. She didn't realize I wasn't in that conversation. She assumed someone had told me. No one had told me. When I called my mother to ask about it, she was quiet for a moment in a way that told me everything. Then she said, "Oh, I thought your uncle was handling invitations." My uncle said he thought my sister was. My sister didn't say anything when I texted her. She left it on red for 2 days. Eventually, my grandmother called me herself. She said, "I want you there. I don't care what anyone says. You come." So I came. The restaurant sat on the 14th floor of a building in the financial district. The kind of place where the lighting was always slightly dim and everything on the menu had a description that took longer to read than the dish took to eat. I'd been to this building before, many times, actually, for reasons I'll get to. I stepped off the elevator and a hostess looked up from her stand. Before I could say anything, she smiled. Not a polite professional smile, but a real one, slightly surprised. She said, "Mr. Ashton, we weren't expecting you until later. Should I let Marcus know you're here?" I said, "It's fine. I'm actually here for a private dinner tonight. My grandmother's birthday." She blinked, then recovered quickly. "Of course. The Linquist party. Right this way." I followed her past the bar, past tables of people having conversations that had nothing to do with me, past a wall of glass that looked out over the city at night, all those lights arranged like something someone had planned with care. The hostess paused at the entrance to a private dining room. I could already hear my brother-in-law's laugh before she opened the door. What happened next, I want to describe carefully, because I've replayed it enough times that I want to get it right. My sister saw me first. She was standing near the far end of the table with a glass of white wine, talking to my uncle's wife. Her expression shifted the way expressions do when someone appears who wasn't factored into the plan. Not hostile, not warm, just recalculating. My uncle noticed next. He excused himself from whatever conversation he was in and walked toward me, and I remember thinking he was going to greet me. But instead, he put a hand on my arm and steered me slightly to the left, away from the main table, toward the edge of the room near a side console where the extra napkins were stacked. He said, "Hey, glad you made it." But his voice had that particular quality where the words and the meaning aren't quite aligned. I said, "Wouldn't miss it." "Where's Gran?" He said she was on her way, running a few minutes late with my aunt. Then he said something that took me a second to fully process. He said, "Listen, we've got a set menu tonight. It's already been arranged. It's going to run pretty high, so if that's a concern for you." I looked at him. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The sentence finished itself. "If that's a concern for you," meaning, if you can't afford it, meaning, we don't expect you to pay, meaning, we didn't plan the evening around you being here. I said, "I'll be fine." He said, "I just want to make sure you're comfortable," which was another sentence that meant something other than its words. My brother-in-law came over then. He had the posture of a man who had decided he was the most important person in any room he entered. and he wore it so consistently, you could almost forget it was a decision. He shook my hand in that way. He had, too firm, too long, like it was a negotiation. He said, "Good to see you." Didn't think he'd make it out. And then, to my uncle, not to me, "We should probably figure out seating before mom gets here." The mom meaning my grandmother, which was not a word he had any real right to use, but he used it the way he used everything that wasn't his. Casually, as though possession was just a matter of confidence. They moved away to confer about the table, and I stood near the extra napkins and looked out the window at the city. My sister came over. She looked good. She always looked good. She'd had a talent for presentation since we were kids, the ability to always seem put together even when things weren't. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "I'm glad you came," and I believe she meant it. I think she genuinely wanted me there in some version of herself. It was just that other version of her, the one that had married my brother-in-law and absorbed his particular architecture of who mattered, that hadn't sent the invitation. She said, "You look tired." I said I'd been working a lot. She said, "Still the same job?" The way she said same job made it sound like a minor tragedy. A small, kind pity. I said yes. Still the same. She nodded and went back to her wine, and I thought about what it means to be known by people who stop paying attention. My grandmother arrived 20 minutes later, and the whole room reorganized itself around her the way rooms always did when she entered them. She was 80 years old and walked with a cane she'd only recently agreed to use, and she wore a deep blue dress that she told me on the phone she'd bought specifically for the occasion. She moved through the room greeting people, and when she got to me, she held my face in both her hands and looked at me for a long moment. She said, "There you are. Not you made it, or glad you came. Just there you are," like I was something she'd been keeping track of. I said, "Happy birthday, Gran." She said, "Sit next to me. I want you next to me." My brother-in-law materialized from somewhere and said, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, that the seating had already been arranged. That Gran was at the head of the table, obviously, but the seats on either side were. My grandmother looked at him. She had a particular look, a grown-up watching it stop arguments in their tracks. It wasn't angry exactly. It was just very still and very certain. She said, "I want my grandson next to me." He said, "Of course," and the smile recalibrated. So I sat next to her. The dinner was the kind that moved slowly in the way expensive dinners do. Course by course, each plate arriving with a little description from the server about what was in it. The conversation moved around the table, in currents, my uncle's business, my sister's renovation, my brother-in-law's opinions about things he'd recently read. I was mostly quiet. I was good at being quiet in rooms like that. Partway through the main course, my brother-in-law said something that was addressed to the table but aimed at me. He was talking about a building in the financial district, a new development, something about the commercial real estate market being overextended. He said these developers who think they can just buy up anything and flip it, most of them don't have any idea what they're getting into. No real experience, just capital and confidence. He said it the way people say things they want you to hear, without wanting to be responsible for saying them directly. My uncle laughed. My sister looked at her plate. My grandmother's hand found mine under the table, and she squeezed once. I didn't say anything. Here's what I didn't say. I didn't say that I had purchased the building we were currently sitting in 14 months ago. I didn't say that this restaurant, the dim lighting, the 14th-floor view, the set menu my brother-in-law had arranged, was on a lease that reported to a property management company that reported to me. I didn't say that the hostess who had greeted me by name had done so because she'd attended 2 of the building's tenant orientation events where I had spoken. I didn't say any of that. I just ate my dinner. Later, when the dessert had come and gone and the server brought the check folder to the table, my brother-in-law reached for it in the way he'd clearly planned to. A gesture that was about authority as much as generosity. He opened it, looked at the total, and made a small sound like a man confirming what he already knew. He said, "This is going to be split between the adults, obviously." And then he looked at me and said, we can cover your portion if." I said, "I've got it." He said, "It's not a small amount." I said, "I know what it is." There was a beat. The kind of beat where a room recalibrates. My sister said, He said he's got it, Weston." That was the first time all evening she used a sentence that pushed back on him, and I noted it. My brother-in-law put the check folder in the center of the table and leaned back with the particular posture of a man who's decided to wait and see. I reached into my jacket. I didn't make a performance of it. I put my card on the table and I said I'd cover the dinner. All of it, Grand's birthday, my treat. My uncle started to object, and I said I'd like to, genuinely, please let me do this. My grandmother squeezed my hand again. She said, "Thank you, sweetheart." The server took my card. 3 minutes later, the restaurant's general manager came to the table personally. His name was Marcus. I'd met him 6 times at minimum, twice for formal property walkthroughs and 4 times at events in the building. He was professional, warm, exactly what you'd want a general manager to be. He said, "Mr. Ashton, I just wanted to come by personally. Happy to have you with us tonight. Please let us know if there's anything we can do to make the evening special for Mrs. Lindquist." He turned to my grandmother. "Happy birthday. It's an honor to have you here." He set a small dessert at my grandmother's place, something extra, off menu, with the candle already lit, and excused himself quietly. The table was very still. My uncle looked at me. My sister looked at the dessert. My brother-in-law's jaw had a quality to it that I recognized from the few times I'd seen him proven wrong. A kind of recalculating stillness. My grandmother laughed. It was a real laugh, full and unhurried. She said, "I wondered when they were going to figure out who you were." I said, "Gran." She said, "Oh, don't gran me. You've been sitting here all night being very well behaved, and I've been watching these people act like you don't know what you're doing." She patted my hand. "Tell them." My uncle said slowly, "Tell us what?" I looked at the table. I'm not going to pretend I hadn't imagined this moment. I'm not going to pretend there wasn't some part of me that had been waiting for a moment like it. Not for revenge, exactly, but for something to be real instead of just true and private. I said, "I own the building. This restaurant is a tenant. Marcus works for the management company I hired." The silence lasted maybe 4 seconds. My brother-in-law said, "You own," I said, "the building." "Yes." He said, "Since when?" I said, 14 months ago. He picked up his water glass and put it down. He said, that's significant." I said, "Yeah." My uncle said, "Why didn't you say anything?" And this is the part I've thought about the most. The answer I want to give you directly, because I think it matters. I didn't say anything because it shouldn't have been necessary. Because I'd been sitting at that table for 3 hours, being treated like someone who needed his dinner covered. And it had nothing to do with what I owned or what I earned. It had to do with the story my family had been telling about me for so long that they'd stopped checking whether it was still true. I said I didn't think it would change anything. My sister said, very quietly, "Would it have?" I looked at her. She was the only one at the table who looked like she was actually asking. I said, "I don't know." That's kind of the point. My grandmother wanted me to drive her home. It was out of my way and I would have done it even if she hadn't asked. In the car, she was quiet for a while. The city moved past the windows. She kept her cane across her lap and looked at it and then looked out the window. She said, "Your grandfather would have been very proud of you." I said, "I know." She said, "Not for the building. For tonight. For sitting there and not making it ugly." She paused. "I know what it cost you." I didn't say anything. She said, "Those people love you. I want you to know I believe that, even when it doesn't look like it. They just love a version of you they invented when you were 17 and they never updated it." She looked at me. "That's their failure, not yours." I pulled up in front of her building. I walked her to the door. She hugged me for a long time before she went in. I sat in my car for a while after. I thought about what she'd said, about the version of me they'd invented, about how much energy I'd spent trying to update it, to show them a different picture, to make the story they were telling become less wrong. And at some point, I couldn't tell you exactly when, I'd stopped trying to change their version and just started building the real one. The building in the financial district had 32 commercial tenants. I had 2 others in development. I woke up early and worked late, and I had not once in 14 months told my family any of it. Not because I was hiding it, but because no one had asked. Not in a real way. Not in a way that made space for the actual answer. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. And I'm not telling you this so you'll think I've won something. I don't think in those terms anymore. I'm telling you because I know what it's like to sit in a room full of people who are supposed to know you and feel completely invisible. I know what it's like to have someone reach for the check on your behalf because they've already decided you can't cover it. I know what it's like to be loved badly, to be held close by people who are simultaneously holding you small. And I know what it's like to decide, slowly and without any single dramatic moment, that the story someone else is telling about you is not the story you have to live inside. My grandmother turns 81 next year. I've already thought about where I want to take her. Somewhere new, just the two of us, where nobody knows anyone's last name and the only version of me that matters is the one she sees when she holds my face in her hands. That's enough. That's always been enough.